14. There, the first blast threw the Doctor and Bathsheba to the ground and filled the air with an acrid smell of burning. The creature let out a wailing cry as if it was in pain. The Doctor raised his head just as a second bolt of light hit the car and ignited the petrol seeping from the damaged tank. The car was turned into a ball of flame that engulfed the creature, but passed with little effect over their heads. The Doctor stood up and looked at the burning wreckage. He seemed dazed. "Doctor, what on earth was that?" Stuart called from the far side of the car. "A plasma bolt," the Doctor murmured. Stuart joined the Doctor and Bathsheba. "But come on, we'd better not hang around. We may not be so lucky next time." He urged the Doctor into a stumbling run, picked up Bathsheba, and followed. A searchlight stabbed down out of the sky, momentarily blinding the three travellers. Half shielding his face and still running, the Doctor tried to find its source. "Damn! It's certain to hit us now. Bloody dragons!" Stuart swore. "A flying rock!" Bathsheba cried, recalling her brother Gabby's words. "What is it?" Stuart called. He shielded his eyes with his arm and strained to make out the detail of the descending object. "Is it a dragon?" "I very much doubt it," the Doctor said. They had all come to a stop now. Stuart let Bathsheba stand again. There could be no more running away. It was obvious that if the thing had intended to kill them, it could already have done so. The small disc-like craft drifted down until it settled on the ground. A door flipped open in its side, and a synthesized voice called out to them. "Enter now. There are more of the rejects in the area." "Well, Doctor?" Stuart asked. He waved the rifle in the direction of the craft. "I don't think we've anything to lose. Come on, Bats." He took Bathsheba's hand, and together they ran over to the waiting vehicle. The interior was dark, and Bathsheba hesitated a moment before allowing herself to be pulled in. When all three were inside, the door closed, and the interior was suffused with a low green light which revealed a shelf around the wall. The Doctor was the first to sit down, but the others quickly followed suit when, with a slight jolt, the machine took flight. The Doctor cleared his throat. "May we be allowed to see our rescuer? Or should that be captor?" A panel slid aside at the front of the craft, revealing a figure hunched over a set of controls. Only the head, enclosed in a broad helmet, was visible over the low-set control position. It half-turned, as if to face them, but nothing more was revealed of its features, for the front of the helmet bore a mirror-like visor. Twin tubes ran down either side of the visor and over the creature's shoulder where, presumably, they joined some sort of gas or nutrient supply. "I received your distress signal." The voice was passionless, free from emotion. Stuart wondered if this were merely the effect of being electronically generated, or if their pilot really spoke in such a way. His words confused Stuart somewhat. "What distress signal? I am intrigued as to how any of you could know of intergalactic distress codes. I have not been paying much attention to exterior informational signals since the end of the experiment, but I had not realized that you humans could advance so much in less than a quarter rotation of star Q76. It will make an interesting observation in my report." "Intergalactic distress codes?" Stuart asked the Doctor, one eyebrow raised. "Rather more sophisticated than Samuel Morse's system," the Doctor told him. "You said that the experiment had ended." The helmet shifted so that it faced forward again. "That is correct. Sociological experiment Ternog was intended to last only as long as the artificial energy supply." "As I thought," the Doctor murmured. There was another bump as the craft settled onto ground again. The interior light was extinguished, and the door opened, letting in a flood of bright light. The Doctor stood and went out. They had landed inside a large hangar. There was no apparent way in for the craft. Presumably it had closed after they had entered, but a set of double doors stood shut in one corner. The hangar was cluttered with mess, stray pipes, metal crates, some closed, some offering tantalizing glimpses of their contents, from colourful soft garments to drab but heavy tomes, and a faint odour of oil. There was a quiet but persistent hum coming from all around them, and once in a while one of the many pipes which ran across the ceiling would emit a low gurgle. A larger construction stood alongside their transport. Stuart gasped at the sight of it. 4 broad black cushions supported a twisted pyramid, whose edges were marked by chrome-gleaming fluting which spiralled together at the vertices. It looked almost as though it might be ornamental, but it was pocked with small crater-like holes. The ground underneath it was heat-stained, and suggested one thing to Stuart. "Is that a spaceship?" he asked wonderingly. "It would appear to be equipped for interstellar travel," the doctor agreed. Their host appeared out of the cockpit of the smaller craft. "Greetings." At least 8 feet tall, he towered over the doctor, but was humanoid at first sight. Only when he moved did Stuart see the fluidity of his limbs, as though they had many joints along their length. He wore an all-encompassing suit, which did not allow any glimpse of the creature within it. The twin tubes, which Stuart had noted earlier, merged into one, and attached to a small canister which hung from a ring at the creature's side. Its fingers, encased in tight-fitting gloves, were long and spindly, and danced constantly, even when the rest of the body was still. The feet were broad and plate-like. There could be no doubt that this being was of alien origin. Everything about it bespoke its different nature. The kettle, the firbolg, the formoir, the shay, all were different, but none had stirred in Stuart the revulsion which this creature so easily produced. But then, Stuart was only human, and in situations which were beyond him, his prejudices never let him down. "I have the pleasure of addressing a Troithran, I believe," the doctor said. "That is correct. You are the doctor. Your physiology is unlike the normal human physiology, and yet there is no sign of my protoplasmic material in your body. This and your knowledge suggests that you are not one of the experimental subjects." Stuart's mind reeled. What were they talking about? "Are you Garivni?" Bathsheba asked tentatively. "That is the name by which I have come to be known," the creature agreed. "So this," thought Stuart, "is the evil creature who has caused so much harm in Tir Na Nog. This is the source of the cancer. Hardly surprising, then, that it caused such sensations of disgust in his mind, even before he knew its identity." "Please cure my arm." She held out her withered arm to show it to Gwivney. He turned his head to look at it, but then looked away. "There is nothing I can do. If I had some protoplasmic material, then I could perhaps correct the musculature defect, but in the time since the experiment ended, the force field protecting the storage module has failed. There is nothing I can do," he repeated. Was there perhaps a touch of remorse in his voice? Bathsheba was crushed by this. But you are Grivney. You must be able to help me." "I am sorry." "You're a god." She began to cry. All hope was gone now. "I am sorry." "He is no god," the doctor told Bathsheba. He had tried to prevent her building up her hopes, but he could see that the illusory pedestal on which she had placed Gwivney had crumbled away into ruins. "He is a scientist. Your whole world is nothing more than an experiment to him. And now the experiment is ended, it holds no further interest to him. Like so many of his kind, he thinks nothing of the consequences of his work." "That is not true," denied Gwivney, but there was no feeling in his words. "No? Have you seen the suffering in Tir Na Nog?" the doctor said harshly. His eyes and face showed the fury which he felt inside. "I have been engaged in the preparations for leaving this world." "And you are going to leave your experimental subjects to die?" "They live and die all the time. They lead such short lives and they die so often." "But never with the agonies that your lack of interest has inflicted upon them," the doctor told him angrily. "Haven't you noticed the demons?" Stuart asked. "Demons?" Gwivney was puzzled momentarily. "Ah, You mean the reject material? It was unfortunate that the force field on the storage module failed. I recognised the fact only when your distress call summoned me from my preparations for departure. What are the demons, anyway? Stuart asked. His attempts to create life forms to populate his sociological experiment, the doctor said. That is correct. I used as a model the mythological creatures of the human species who inhabit the primary life-bearing planet in the Sol system. In my search for a suitable test location, that species was suggested to me, and I found their imaginative fancies so unique that I determined to see how such creatures would function under actual conditions. I took samples of the genetic material of many of that planet's creatures and then altered their forms using my protoplasmic material. You seem very proud of your achievement, the doctor said. I am. Then why leave them to perish? The experiment is over. Obviously, this explanation seemed perfectly reasonable to Grivney. But what are the demons? Stuart persisted. In my quest to reproduce the creatures which I desired from my experiments, I made some mistakes whose psychology was entirely incorrect. They were violent, unsociable, undesirable. I consigned the rejects to the storage module. This was also a mistake, but will contribute to a refinement of my experimental technique. The pool of protoplasm was contaminated by the abhorrent creations, and I did not have the resources to create a surrogate human type. At first, I thought that the experiment could proceed as it was, but the 4 basic subjects required the interaction of humans. Fortunately, at the request of Hern Creature, I had set up a transmat link to the home planet of the humans, and so I was able to obtain breeding stock. The doctor put this in his own words. So, you kidnapped them from their home world, got them to breed, and then used them in your experiment. And now you're leaving them to die. And I suppose the excess contaminated protoplasmic material has been unleashed on Tir Na Nog as well. There is no indication of any organic material left within the storage module, Guivney commented. His silver mask concealed any regret that he might feel at this circumstance. So you were careless enough to let your rejects escape from their test tube, and they're violent, unsociable, and undesirable. Stuart shook his head. When I was a student, you could always tell the ones who'd go on to become research scientists. They lacked soul, they were heartless. Come here, Bathsheba, he said. He put his arms around her and let her sob into his side. It is against all regulations for me to allow the experiment to continue longer than the requisite time period. But all you'd have to do would be to restock the artificial sun with fuel. What are you talking about, Doctor? Stuart asked. He could see no further point in continuing the discussion with this alien. His experiment was intended to last only as long as the artificial sun was burning. That is why he is leaving just when Tir Na Nog faces his greatest peril and needs him most. It would be highly irregular if I were to allow the experiment to continue without supervision. But surely they have proved that their society is stable without your intervention. That was one of the conclusions I had tentatively arrived at. Well then, but there is no way I could refuel the artificial energy supply. The doctor made a suggestion. What about the fuel from your spacecraft? I have to return to Troyfres. Surely you have an excess of fuel. It is a possibility I could look into. And, the doctor suggested, you could return when the sun had run out of fuel again and observe how Tir Na Nog had developed. Have you considered an experiment on such a grand scale? No. Despite the synthesized nature of his voice, there was a touch of excitement there. It is an interesting concept. I could suggest it to the Funding Council. Please wait here. I must consider the implications. He strode off, his legs moving in sinuous motions, and vanished through the sliding double doors. Doctor, Stuart asked, who is this person? No, what is this person? He makes my flesh crawl. Why, this is Guivney, Bathsheba said bitterly. She pulled away from Stuart and sat on a section of thick concertinaed piping that snaked across the grey concrete floor. Go with me, who I believed in. Go with me, who could cure me. Sometimes it's best not to believe in something too strongly. We're often disappointed by high expectations unfulfilled, the doctor advised her. How do you know so much about this creature? Stuart asked him. I suspected that a Treiflan might be involved ever since I saw the marks on the Firbolg. Treiflan numerals are widespread in the galactic scientific community. The Treiflans themselves are terribly efficient about keeping tabs on everything they do. So everything he has created exhibits a Treiflan numeral to show which experiment it was and whether or not it was a success. The Treiflans, he continued, are quite infamous in certain quarters, you see. They consider themselves to be a scholarly people. Over half of the surface area of their home planet, Treifres, is covered by a university complex. But they're terribly vulgar, always trying to do things bigger and better than the next species. I remember when they set out to prove that the universal gravity constant could vary. They built a massive gravitometer that stretched for several light years. Played havoc with numerous solar systems when they lost control of it. This whole setup had the feel of being an enormous experiment of the Treiflans. Stuart shook his head. I'm trying to take this all in, but you're saying that this whole world is just a guinea pig sociological test? Yes. The arc lamps suspended from the vaulted ceiling flickered momentarily and then were restored. Stuart looked up at the convoluted mess of dully gleaming pipes and conduits amongst which the light wires became hopelessly entangled. The whine of power being generated elsewhere in the building rose slightly higher pitch. What was that? He asked. By the sound of it, and considering the energy consumption of matter transmission, I would imagine it was a matter transmitter being used. You mean Goivni's left us here? Gone to Earth? Why would he hide? He has nothing to fear from us. We are nothing, Bathsheba said. Don't denigrate yourself, Bathsheba. But I doubt he's left us. I doubt it very much. No, I should think he has considered my suggestion and decided to take it up. My lords! Carrion burst through the door of the council chamber. His face was flushed, and a beatific smile brightened the whole of his visage. What do you mean, Carrion, by coming in like this? My apologies, my Lord Barras, but it is a miracle. The Land Mother has answered all our prayers. We have been delivered from the darkness. Stop babbling and tell us what you want us to know, Driffid commanded the druid. My lord, Dagda's wheel has been restored to us. What? Nuada turned on him. A wild fury blazed in his coal-pit eyes. I was standing on the wall when suddenly all was light again, and I looked to the sky and Dagda's wheel shone as brightly as ever before. Are you sure about this? Rhys asked sceptically. You haven't been taking one of your druidic potions, have you? Of course not, Captain Rhys. Come up and see. Yes, I think we should, and Dagda be praised if it is true, Driffid said. Nuada added, and I'll feed your head to Arorn if it isn't. Come, come, Carrion beckoned. The entire council left the room and made their way up through the wall. They commented excitedly as they passed windows through which bright sunlight streamed. At each window they left behind someone basking in the warmth, hardly believing that such a sensation could be real. Ignored, the 4 Earth people followed, not wanting to be left out of the action. Stevens supported Ace, still weak from her collapse. Did you notice, Ace said, that Carrion's lisp has gone? It must be the excitement. Yes. What happened to you back there, Ace? You saw what Emrys brought back from Earth. I had a sort of psychic link with Bat. It's broken irretrievably now. I feel empty, as though some part of me has been taken away. Her voice was weighted with sadness and affected Stephen strangely. I don't know what to say. When my wife died, I imagine I felt much as you do now. What can I say? In time, it will pass. Perhaps. Behind them walked Jack and David, still bemused by the turn of events. It was still something of a shock that the source of the centaur that they had found was a mysterious world of fantasy. It was something akin to finding out where babies came from. I mean, is it a parallel universe, Jack whispered, or what? Don't give me those sci-fi cliches, Jack. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of this. So what is it? Hey, how would I know? Since when have I been perfectly reasonable? It's strange, you know. Oh, yeah, I hadn't noticed. No, David said. There's something about this place. I can't quite put my finger on it. I wish I could figure it out. A silence fell over the ascending group as they emerged out into the open air, as though the brightness was stilling the air and muffling all noise. Carrion turned, faced them all, and spread his arms wide. Behold, Dagda's wheel! Fall down on your knees and worship the Land Mother! Be silent, Carrion, Nuada ordered. Silent? This is a time for rejoicing. We have been saved by Dagda. He has judged us worthy. He turned to the sun and held out his hand in supplication. We should shout. Even as they stood, a small bird began to trill its song from where it had rested momentarily on the grey rock of the wall. With a flurry of wings, it flew from its perch and settled on Carrion's hand, then resumed its hymn of joy. Driffid shook his head in wonder. He felt tears begin to prick at his eyes as the wonderful, refreshing light flowed around and into his body. He rocked back and forth on his heels, revelling in the incredibly sensuous, almost sexual thrill that coursed through his old body. He too, like Carrion, wanted to cry out to the beautiful azure blue sky and praise the gods. It didn't matter that the air was as chill as Formois steel, for the heat sent by Dagda warmed his flesh and, far more importantly, rekindled the fire in his soul. This is indeed a time for rejoicing, he agreed. Not only has Dagda's wheel been restored, so has our high druid's faith. Rejoice, friends. We must make all haste to negotiate a peace with our fellow Tir-Nan Nogians. There is no longer any need to leave our home. You forget the demons, Driffid, Barras of Tirion warned. Cast away that sad face, Barras. United we can drive them back. They are still scattered, and we may hunt them down. The return of the sun had invigorated Driffid considerably. All the despair of the time of darkness had evaporated in the light. Let us descend to the gates, fling them wide, and demonstrate our friendship to the assembled armies. Come! He led the council back into the darkness of the wall. Ace, gazing at the panoramic view of Tir-Nan Nog which had hitherto been hidden, and marvelling at its beauty, found herself being left behind. She looked out across the marvellous snow-clad hills, and felt for a moment the magic that she had experienced when she and the doctor had first rode out across the land. But the feeling was soured by what had happened to Bat. Ace cast a glance towards the towering quartz mountains in the south, but then her gaze was drawn northwards, past the milling armies at the foot of the wall, and settling on the barely visible outskirts of the forest of Coed. Her thoughts reached out across the miles, searching for the doctor amongst the trees. But then she turned on her heels and hurried after the others down the stairs. She discovered that she was looking at a familiar back. It wore a chainmail vest, and brown hair hung in coils around its shoulders. She shivered at her remembrance of the other time she had encountered this man. General Nuada, his name was, she now recalled. She deadened her footfalls, hoping that he wouldn't turn his wild eyes upon her. But when he split away from the main group, she felt bound to follow him. He hadn't joined in the general good humour that the appearance of Dagda's wheel had instigated. Ace knew that something was going on here. Just as she had before, she followed him by the clop-clop sound of his wooden sandals striking the floor, and, just as before, she managed to lose him when the echoes confused her and sent her off into the maze of corridors. She cursed her bad luck in choosing the wrong path, but determined to find where he was heading. She came upon him in much the same position that he had been in that night, standing at the window gazing outwards. The sunlight fell onto his face, but didn't seem to illuminate it. He was mumbling incoherently to himself, his head swaying from side to side. Ace crept a little closer to try and hear what he was saying. It seemed that he was calling to something, but she couldn't be sure what. Suddenly, as if exhausted, Nuada fell back from the window. He reeled about in the small space of the corridor and then collapsed on the floor, his chest heaving. Ace came out of hiding and knelt down by him. His eyes were shut and his breathing had slowed now. It was as though he had passed out. Automatically, she reached forward to loosen the tightly constricting chainmail vest where its collar embraced his neck. She slipped her fingers into it and tried to find some way of unfastening it. Working her hands around it, she brushed back the dark mane of hair from his neck. With a gasp of surprise, she stood back from him. Trelane had told her about the witch mark and what it meant. How could a member of the Tuatha De Danann carry the mark on his neck? Nuada was a witch, of that she was certain. Did it mean anything? She didn't know. But when his eyes snapped open and blazed with red fury, she understood completely why Trelane feared the witches as much.